Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Institute for Government. Welcome to those in the room and to what I hope is a large online audience as well. My name is Akash Pau and I'm Programme Director for Devolution here at the IFG, and I'm really pleased to be chairing this session on how ministers should decide the size and shape of new unitary authorities. Very live and interesting, and in many cases contentious question, I think, and we're going to be hearing a number of different perspectives on that over the course of the next hour. This is the first event we are running as part of a series in partnership with Grant Thornton, and we're very grateful to Grant Thornton, represented on the panel by Joanne Brown, Partner of Public Sector Audit at Grant Thornton. We're grateful to them for their support of the series. Also up on the panel with me, delighted to be joined by Councillor Kay Mason-Billig, Leader of Norfolk County Council. Welcome, Kay. Online joining us from Brighton, I think, or somewhere in Sussex at least, Bella Sankey, Leader of Brighton and Hove City Council. Hi, Bella, hope you can see and hear us okay. Look forward to hearing from you shortly. People may have noticed the Minister, Baroness Taylor, originally due to be joining us, has been called away to urgent parliamentary business. I understand the Devolution bill is back in the Lords, so sadly she's unable to be with us. But very fortunately, we have our local government reorganisation expert, Matthew Fright, Senior Researcher here at the IFG, joining us instead to channel the government thinking without ever being held responsible for it before anyone blames him or anything along those lines. So that's the panel. The key question, as mentioned, is specifically about these decisions ministers will be taking, we think in many cases next month, at least in some areas, on the size and shape of the new unitary authorities. The context of this is, of course, that a year and a bit ago, the government announced this big, brave, you might say, in yes, Minister terms, local government reorganisation process, replacing two-tier local councils in all of the now 20 remaining county areas where you have that split between counties and districts. Places were invited to come forward with proposals in line with or by reference to specific criteria that we'll be speaking a bit more about how they would like to see the boundaries drawn for those new councils. In every single one of the areas concerned, there are at least two, often 3, 4, 5 competing propositions put forward, and the government ministers now have the challenging task of deciding between them. And that's what we are here to discuss. As part of the series with Grant Thornton, watch this space for more information, but we will be holding events over the course of the next year on various other key questions, key aspects of the LGR process, including how central government should support the councils going through the LGR process. That's the one we're hoping to hold before the summer. We'll then do sessions on questions such as how new councils can secure cost savings as they go through the LGR process, and how LGR can deliver service transformation and better integration, perhaps, of things currently split between the county and district level. So the series as a whole will be looking at that broader set of questions. Today we are focused on that question of the footprints of the new local authorities. And to kick us off, I'm going to turn first to my colleague Matthew to talk us through what do we know about how the government intends to take decisions between, as we've heard, I think you were telling me before, there's 70 options across the 20 remaining areas. So what do we know about the criteria? Are those the right criteria as well? And yeah, how is the government going about this process?
Thank you, Akash. So how the decisions facing a local area very much depend on which one of the 3 streams they're on. In the first category, Surrey, is the most advanced in its LGR journey. It's going to be split into two unitary authorities, West Surrey and East Surrey, with shadow unitary elections due to take place in May. In the second category, you've got the devolution priority programme areas, Norfolk and Suffolk, Sussex and Brighton, Hampshire and the Solent Greater Essex. They've completed public consultations and the government is reviewing these right now and taking decisions on what the final geographic footprints will be. These decisions are due out next month. In the third stream, which is basically all other remaining areas, consultations are ongoing and will close in a month's time. When launching this local government reorganisation round, the government gave a firm steer to areas, gave six overarching criteria and 21 sub-criteria that it would use to judge proposals. And these include, and I hope you don't mind quoting directly, criteria such as unitary structures must prioritise the delivery of high quality and sustainable public services to citizens, new unitary services must support devolution arrangements, and new unitary structures should enable stronger community engagement and deliver genuine opportunity for neighbourhood empowerment. Now, different proposals will score differently on these different criteria, and it will be down to government to basically evaluate what matters the most in the proposals that come forward. Is it going to be that the operating on a sensible economic geography is going to be the key determinant? Is it their stated preference for having 500,000 as a population? Is it their guiding principle? Do they want larger scale authorities? And ultimately, it's going to come down to ministers to make the final call, because under legislation, they are the ones who have to bring forward the proposals and ultimately can even change the proposals that have been brought forward, altering and coming up with different geographic footprints. Now, as I said, a government decision has already been taken in Surrey, and it had the choice of going either with a 2 unitary authority model or a 3 unitary authority model. And it's, or like I say, the preferred self-generated alternative. It opted for the 2 unitary authority model and justified its decision on the basis that this would be more likely to be financially sustainable and ultimately be the right size to deliver efficiencies and other aspects. But it also cautioned that we can't really read too much into this specific decision, because it also wants to have decisions tailored for local areas. So we cannot really read into it and say this is its revealed preference. I suppose really the final thing I want to say in conclusion on this is say that self-evidently, these are really tricky decisions to make, and there are going to be inevitable trade-offs between the different types of criteria that the government's outlined, but also there'll be ramifications to local areas. So local communities are going to have to navigate these, take action where needed to mitigate any of the downsides that come out of these decisions, and ultimately pull together to make the success of new governance arrangements for their proposed areas in what's quite a short time frame.
Thanks, Matthew. And I mean, as you set out, there's a lot of, I'm glad you didn't read out all 21, but there's a lot of criteria and principle that the government is going to take into account. I mean, overall, do you feel there's any clarity about where the real emphasis is going to lie? I mean, you've spoken about the decision for Surrey. Are we expecting quite different decisions in different places, or do we expect to see a kind of consistent approach across the piece?
It's difficult to say at the moment how that trade-off splits between consistency and sort of bespoke decisions. I think overall it's been really useful as an exercise to give a steer to the sector, and certainly has been more advanced in earlier rounds of LGR in terms of what the government will be evaluating good against. I do think, though, there are some pragmatic considerations that have to be taken into account with each of the criteria. They aren't always just out-and-out good considerations. They're always positives and negatives. So, you know, if you're aiming for scale, that doesn't always necessarily result in greater efficiency. You may push for a sensible economic geography, but sometimes the data that this is drawing on, the travel to work area data, can be from the 2011 census, because often we don't use the 2021 census because COVID was in operation. And there's a desire for areas to coordinate with major stakeholders in the area, but there's an awful lot of reform that's in train at the moment. So ICBs are being restructured, policing reform. So also, you know, the call for greater alignment with devolution arrangements, but then the government's then created more of a preference for foundation strategic authorities. So this is an evolving policy landscape, and it we're really quite beholden on leaders to, once the decisions come out, to say, actually, okay, well, we have this geography, now let's go back to stage one and say, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses around this model?
Yeah, thanks. Okay, no, really helpful to set the scene in that way. We're now going to dive into two specific and quite different local perspectives and stories. So Bella, going to come to you first. Brighton and Hove City Council, which you lead, of course, has made the case and put the proposal to government for 5 smaller scale unitary authorities across the whole Sussex and Brighton area. But there's 3 other proposals on the table, as I understand it. East Sussex and West Sussex County Councils both would rather have a 3 unitary model, retaining their own geography as it stands, and there's another proposal on the table as well. So I just wonder if you could talk us through what you see as the benefits of having 5 smaller scale unitary authorities, given the government, is keen to secure those efficiency savings from the LGR process.
Thanks, Akash, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be joining this panel on such an important topic and at such an important moment. I think the first thing to say from my perspective is that I think local government reorganisation presents a huge and very positive opportunity for all of the places that are undertaking it. That's not to say it's not difficult. That's not to say it doesn't test relationships. That's not to say it hasn't led us to, be under even more pressure in terms of workload of officers and all the rest of it. But to actually get this right and to ensure that local government is on a sustainable and coherent footing going forward, I think is a huge kind of once in a generation opportunity. So I really welcome that. As you say, Brighton and Hove is currently already a unitary authority. We have approximately 280,000 residents, and we've been in existence for 25 years. We have put forward a proposal which seeks to meet the challenge that government has set, thinking through all of the different criteria that they have put forward, but which we think responds to the economic geography of our place here in Sussex. And so the way that we lent into that challenge was by first looking at that economic geography in detail, as you say, travel to work patterns, but also to look at what other services residents are using on a day-to-day basis, whether that is work, education, whether it is NHS services, whether it is leisure, how people spend their free time, and the journeys that they go on. We've put forward a proposal that essentially would see Brighton and Hove merging with a set of wards to our east, that would also create 2 coastal urban authorities in East and West Sussex, and that also looks to then build 2 mainly rural new unitary authorities also in East and West. We, having done a lot of research, having looked at our own internal databases and evidence, having spoken to leaders in other places, feel strongly that unitaries of between 300 and 400,000 hold the potential to not only unlock economies of scale, most unitaries in the country are below that size currently, but also to ensure that unitaries of the future stay close to their residents, have clear lines of accountability, enhance democracy and residents feeling that they are in touch with their council, they understand where the decisions are being made, they know how to engage with the processes. And we think that is the real prize here. I think, as you've touched on, Akash, this is always going to be a potentially tricky and difficult process. You're asking colleagues that work incredibly hard delivering services, in our case, over 700 services to our residents, to think about how they unpick what is currently set up to work. But I know from my experience in a unitary authority, leading a unitary authority, the potential that unitarisation holds. Our authority was under no overall political control for 20 years. And so I think we've not yet, even here in Brighton and Hove, felt the full benefit of unitarisation. But when you can integrate the services you provide in the way that you can in a unitary authority, particularly if you've got then a devolution settlement that is being put into place as we have here in Sussex, I think the potential to really start transforming services, to start leading on things like public sector reform, place-based budgets, and all the rest of it is huge. And so I think this is a really welcome process, and look forward to Ministers' reflections and decisions.
Thanks very much, Bella. Yeah, no, that's it's really helpful to hear your the case for the model you're putting forward. I mean, in terms of the specific question around size, I mean, as you set out, your model would have 5 unitaries, each roughly equal size, between 300,000 and 400,000. I mean, what kind of feedback have you had or response informally from government? I mean, given initially when the LGR process was launched, there was talk about 500,000 as the benchmark, or even larger if possible, and there was a sense that a lot of this agenda was being driven by cost savings and maybe with the Treasury kind of pushing for it on that basis. Do you feel that there is openness to what you're putting forward?
So I think it's a really good question. My sense of things are that in the initial white paper that was published back in, when was it, December 24, that was obviously a huge white paper covering devolution and local government reorganisation, huge kind of constitutional change. And as with any white paper, government puts forward a set of proposals, ideas, talking points, and then they see the response from the sector. I think government was really clear from the outset that they intend this to be a dialogue between central and local government. You can't enter into this process thinking that one of those entities holds all of the answers to what is, we hope, a sort of enduring and ever developing relationship and conversation as we start to devolve more powers down to places. I think government was really quick to recognise that, there is no one-size-fits-all answer to this. The correct size in different places is going to depend on a lot of factors. I think that my reading of that white paper was that they kind of pitched a guiding figure where they did, because they really wanted to signal to us in local government that they are keen to realise economies of scale. So it was no good us all putting in proposals for, hundreds and hundreds of unitaries that would be populations of 100,000. So I think it was a kind of, a starting point for the conversation. I think government's been really quick to recognise, they're not treating that as a particular guardrail or a target that has to be met. It was more to give us an indication that they do want unitaries on a realistic size basis.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So turning to you then, Kate. I mean, Norfolk County Council has made the case, contrary to the position Bella's been laying out, for that single unitary authority across the whole of Norfolk. So you have gone for large scale. What do you see as the advantages of that approach, and also perhaps the downsides or challenges that model will pose?
I mean, the reason that we've gone for the single county unitary is, partly 85% of all services are already delivered by the county council. That's a fact, and they're the big services. They're mainly social care and highways, things like that. So if we're going to be making savings and we're going to be able to resist financial shocks, which is one of the other criteria that the government set out, then we need to have the economies of scale. And people look at Norfolk and say, well, it's a really huge place. I mean, we're over 2,000 square miles and nearly 1 million people. But we already divide ourselves down into smaller areas for delivering services like children's services and adult social care. So we do deliver services directly into people's homes. We are not remote in the slightest. It's just people looking in from the outside may think that. So if we're going to be financially stable going into the future, we can't divide Norfolk up into 2 or 3. And if you start doing things like that, you create artificial boundaries. And we know what happens with people who are in crisis. They'll often move boundaries in order to disappear under the radar. Now, all of our other key stakeholders, like the health service, like the police, are all done on a single county footprint. And at the moment, we all work together very well. So we have one social worker team in each hospital. If you have 3 unitaries, you're going to have 3 in each hospital. Now, how is that actually efficient or going to make any savings? And you also have to remember that shire counties like mine are being continually squeezed from central government funding. We are more and more reliant on what we raise in council tax. We can't expect the government to fund us going forward. The fairer funding settlement wasn't particularly fair for shires, I have to say. They don't recognise how much more expensive it is to deliver services in a very rural area. So that's another reason why we have got to be self-sufficient. And we have quite a unique problem in Norfolk. Norwich City is the centre of our county. And in 2010, we thought we were going to get a single unitary in the city, with a donut around the outside, which would have been completely unmanageable. And there was a change in government, and the idea was pulled. And I think the reason for that is because it isn't easy to divide up a county like that. And when you have such a huge coastal border as we have, a lot of people don't actually ever move out of Norfolk for work. So Norwich City has a much greater reach in terms of the whole county of Norfolk. If you start drawing lines around it, and the 3 unitary proposal would draw a new line around the Norwich City area, you're still going to be an underbounded city, you're still going to have problems, and you're going to end up with 2 quite poor areas because all of the economic heft is going to be in that central unitary.
And if you do, if your proposal is the one that government decides upon, I mean, what's the plan for balancing the benefits of the large scale, the efficiency savings you'll be able to deliver, with the need for connection with local communities that, I mean, some people fear the LGR process in general is going to detract from?
Well, we've been told we must have a community basis for whatever we do. So we're looking at community boards. And I'm not talking about parish councils, because we have areas that are parish and areas that are not parish. We're talking about larger organisation that includes parish councils, includes representatives from health, perhaps from the police, that can have their own budgets and can make decisions locally. So there would have to be a structure underneath, because I recognise that in the same way that we deliver social care, you're going to need structures that are closer to people, where they feel they have some input. Otherwise, the big unitary may look too remote. But we have 7 districts at the moment. 3 unitaries is going to be bigger than 7 districts. So whatever model we actually get, we're going to have that structure underneath of neighbourhood boards of some sort.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So Jo, turning to you. So we've heard 2 different perspectives, reference to numerous different criteria. I mean, based on your experience, how should the government go about this process? How should ministers weigh up these different metrics in taking these decisions?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, listening to today and the debate has actually just reconfirmed it's not going to be easy for government. There is a lot of criteria, and there's a concern and a question over how do you weight that criteria? Do you weight it more on the local unique factors, or do you weight it more back to the principles of LGR, resilience, financial sustainability? What's more important, and when is something more important? So ultimately, I think they have to be consistent in their decision making. I think how they do this evaluation will basically set how government and local government work together in the future to reform. So no pressure on the government, but a lot hinges on getting it right. I think there's a couple of points to draw through around, particularly around communication. They really do need to communicate the rationale for the decision. They've done a lot of engagement, so they're going to have a lot of feedback through the consultation process. Of that consultation, what did they listen to? What did they change? What did that actually mean? How did that change the LGR model? And how are they transparent in that evaluation? So are they clear what they will give more weighting to? And will that change depending on which part of the country they're looking at LGR? I think it's just really important that they're very, very clear and transparent, and that there is a place, I think, listening to the argument for commonality, because you could end up with multiple models, which does lead to fragmentation, a risk of doing things very, very differently, inefficiency, silo decision making. Yet you also have the risk that you go for commonality and you miss the unique place aspect and the community aspect, which is also a principle within LGR. Ultimately, they need ownership. You need ownership of LGR. So to have ownership, I think the government itself needs to be transparent in that decision making. Otherwise, LGR won't be able to land. It'll just be an uphill struggle for organisations. And that framework, without a clarity of framework of decision making, how are they in years to come going to evaluate whether LGR has reformed the way it should have reformed, the way they intended through the white paper? Without that clear process to evaluate the benefits, then what benefits are there if they're not being clear on how they've reached those decisions? And ultimately, for the unitaries, LGR is just the start of that conversation. It's how do then government guide the unitaries through that change, through capacity, capability. So it's very important they're transparent now, but government need to stay throughout the process, offering that support and guidance as relevant to each of the unitaries they then establish.
Yeah, I think, that point about how success will be judged in future is an important one if it's not clear what the basis for taking the decisions in the first place is, that becomes difficult. I mean, just wonder if you have any further reflections on assessing success of these kind of reorganisation processes or places where places that have been through the process in the past, like what are the lessons you might draw from how you can assess and evaluate success after the fact?
I think it comes back to being clear on that criteria. What is the fundamental criteria? Are you driving, resilience, financial sustainability? Is it about transformation to drive out savings, or is it about improved service design? And what is the real position you're in before you go into these new unitaries? It's very difficult to effectively carve up districts, to carve up social care. How much programme management, how much time and evaluation goes into things around, where do services sit? Where does the capital funding come from? Have you got the right skills and capacity and capability? So if you think about some of the lessons that are learned elsewhere, sometimes it's very hard in local government to recruit and retain staff. It's very hard to recruit in a unitary model. What does that do in terms of where do you get your capacity and capability from? There is an argument with size that you'll get that capacity and capability, but that's not always what happens in practice. So there's a lot that needs to sit, I guess, from our experience under LGR around capability, the programme office support, how do you get in the right people, how do you get the right challenge? There's a lot of work that needs to go into getting LGR to a place from before day one, never mind some of these transformation. It's going to take years before you see the full transformation and then the clarity of what it is you're evaluating against.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So I'm going to come to the audience shortly. I know it's good to see lots of online questions too. I mean, one final bit I wanted to put to the panel, particularly I think Bella and Kay, is a question about the interaction between LGR and these decisions about the boundaries for new unitaries and the devolution process, because in both Brighton and Sussex, Norfolk and Suffolk, you're on the devolution priority programme. The idea now is you complete the LGR process, new unitaries are established, and then a strategic authority is formed out of those unitaries, however many there are, with a mayor eventually, we think. All of this has shifted a bit in terms of timing. So, but my question is really, how do those two decision-making processes intersect? And I mean, Bella, how is the model you're putting forward for LGR? How are you taking into account how the eventual devolution model will operate once you're through the LGR process?
Thanks, Hikesh. I think it's an excellent question. And one of the things I'm probably most proud of and pleased with our proposals is that we have very much come to this with devolution in mind. As I mentioned earlier, the white paper obviously covered both. And really, this is constitutional reform, major constitutional reform. The government wants devolution in all places ultimately, and local government reorganisation is meant to support this new constitutional framework where we will have regional tiers of government and unitary authorities that sit beneath that, but then obviously form a really important part of what these new strategic authorities will be made up of, sitting on those boards with mayors, making decisions in the interest of that whole place. Our proposal put forward unitaries of broadly equal size, so between 300 and 400,000 people for all 5. And that was very deliberate. Not only do we think that is ultimately the best number for delivery and to get all of the different sort of benefits that unitary government can offer while being close to communities and retaining community identity, we actually think it's going to be an important principle of setting up our new devolution framework, that each community in each place feels that they have a kind of equally valued stake and role in making devolution successful. We know that devolution is meant to be a kind of coming together of each constituent authority, putting aside for some of the decision making their own kind of direct interest in their places and trying to think about the place as a kind of bigger regional unit. We think that's easier to do when everyone feels that there is fair representation, and that the way, you know, all of the kind of technical but really important decisions that need to be made around financial liabilities, how money is apportioned, how decisions are made and where that money flows is so much easier when it feels that there is fair representation. So I think that is a really important principle. And if proposals can, you know, get the foundations right for devolution, I think that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, thank you. And in your case, Kay, I mean, how does the One Norfolk model align with your eventual vision for devolution across Norfolk and Suffolk?
Well, the devolution journey is something we've been on for about 10 years now, and we had a county deal for Norfolk, and then we had a change of government, then we didn't have a county deal for Norfolk, and then we were asked to go in with Suffolk, which is something we've worked to get over the line. The moving of the mayoral election has been very disappointing because we were 90% of the way there and we could certainly have delivered that. We believe that was the government's main priority. LGR was something that we didn't see, it wasn't in the manifesto, and so it looks like the two things have been switched round, and LGR has to come first with devolution second, which I think is regrettable really, because we could easily have done it the other way round. We are expected to have 2 representatives from Suffolk and 2 representatives from Norfolk who sit on the strategic authority with the mayor when we get a mayor eventually. If we have 3 unitaries, they're going to have a punch-up as to who represents gets those 2 spaces. I mean, it makes life a lot more difficult. And I think it also weakens the voice of the county. If you have Norfolk as Norfolk sitting on that strategic authority and Suffolk as Suffolk, and you have single unitaries in each county, I think it makes it a much stronger voice and much easier to have influence when it comes to the mayor making decisions. I'm deeply concerned about the increase in the powers that seem to be going to the mayor all the time. There's something else is added on and something else is added on. And I think a mayor is going to have to be some sort of superhuman being in order to be able to cope with all this. For example, the fire service now has to be rolled into the strategic authority. We have one in Norfolk. They have one in Suffolk. They're completely different animals. We're now expected to merge these together and have them ready for April 2027. That's almost a job too difficult, but it doesn't seem to matter how much you say this. It's here's your deadline and get on with it. So we've got to do the best we can. But devolution will be a good thing. It's something we've wanted for a long time. We want the powers, we want the money. We feel we've been overlooked for many years. There's no economic development cash comes to county councils now. So it's got to be a good thing. I just wish they'd stuck to the original timeline.
Yeah. So did we. We made that case, certainly, as well. OK, so very keen to bring in questions from the audience. I'll take some online in a minute, but if anyone in the room would like to signal, there's a microphone. So, yes, anyone else? We'll take groups of 3 questions. Yeah, we'll go to the gentleman here, Rob, and then one more. Yes, the lady there. Thanks.
Thank you, Akash.
You are, yes.
Tom Brake from Unlock Democracy. I must say I'm disappointed that the whole of this conversation has been about whether 350,000, 400,000, or in the case of Norfolk, 950,000 people is the right level of population for local government. It seems to me as though communities and how they are represented, there's not that much evidence that having very large unitary authorities is going to ensure they are properly represented. So how can our panellists explain how this is going to be of benefit to people in terms of how they feel their views are being listened to and responded to? And I suppose, and the final point is there actually that much evidence that large unitary authorities deliver efficiency savings? Where is that evidence?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so Susanna here. Oh yeah, the lady there, and then we can go that way around.
Hi, thank you. I am Samantha Carmichael from Kratos Group. We work in local government affairs, and off the back of your question almost really, we recently commissioned some polling ahead of the 2026 elections, mainly in London, but I think this is still relevant, and it signalled kind of voter discontent and a shift essentially in trust from government centrally, but also local councils. And people essentially have said that they do have declining trust in the performance of their councils and in their councillors. And I'm just curious how you see local government reorganisation potentially impacting this level of trust and engagement that people have with local politics. Do you think it is a good thing because councils will ultimately get bigger? Do you think that it could have an impact? So yeah, thoughts would be welcome on that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mark Langdale from Arcadis, and happily my question follows on nicely from those. It's famously difficult to explain to anyone from the outside how on earth English local government is as it is. You have to have this sort of huge history lesson. Going forward, does the panel think it matters both for local communities but also for business and for investors as to whether there's continued vast diversity of models or actually greater consistency to the benefit of those two groups, both business and local communities? Okay, very good questions. Who would like to go first? Matthew, you're looking prepared. Go ahead.
I mean, specifically on the evidence-based point,
Yes.
I think as many people have established, there has been a lack of publication around the evidence base supporting the claim that greater scale leads to greater efficiency. Certainly in some earlier rounds of local government reorganisation, the then Department for Health, Communities and Local Government published analysis about the same kind of time that looked across multiple dimensions, across different services, value for money and how they're performing, to say what they thought was the best delivery model for these services, and established that actually the picture really does vary service by service. In some cases, as scale goes up, you get economies of scale. Others, you get diseconomies, and some you get these really funny little saddle points where there's a specific optimum. And off the back of that, they said the balance was about the 250 to 300,000 mark was what was previously judged to be the right kind of scale, the right kind of sale, sorry. That has been lacking this time. The most that we've seen has been the publication that was done by a consultancy organisation that said that if you devolve, you get about 2.5, 2.8 billion's worth of savings across the sector. The slight challenge with that was it only looked at two-tier areas. It didn't look at neighbouring unitary authorities. It also didn't evaluate, or rather, what it concluded as well is that the more you cut up the large-scale county councils, the lower the savings are. And actually, most of the proposals that are coming forward presume that there's going to be some form of cutting up there. So there is still this gap in public discussion in terms of what is the evidence base surrounding it. What has been the case from other areas that have undergone unitarisation is there are some definable bankable savings that you get. So instead of having multiple chief executives, there are very clear lines that you can end up accruing that will actually deliver some economies. What you also find, though, is that these areas also have to hire a lot of people in the process too, to build up the strategic capacity at the centre to deal with not only can we deliver the unitary authority, but also are we going to be able to handle all of the massive transformation projects that come afterwards as we start to merge contracts, start to merge services and all of that. So I think that it's one of these areas where there needs to be further publication on this to actually justify the claim that there is automatically larger economies through larger scale.
Yeah, and I mean, you've not been so immodest to promote it yourself, but I mean, your previous two reports, I think, point to, on this subject, one we did previously with Grant Thornton last year, pointed to specific examples of cost savings in areas where LGR had taken place previously, North Yorkshire and places like that. So that you've tried to pull together some of that evidence. I mean, Joe, on that question, like, where do you think the evidence points to? Like, where is the potential? Is the evidence strong that there is potential for those efficiency savings in moving to these larger scale unitaries?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely Matthew's point that there is elements of evidence and there is clear rationale and business case for larger, driving bigger savings for the examples that you've talked about. I think one of the challenges is turning that rhetoric into then the evidence. So I think what we need is those earlier devolution, the earlier LGR models to actually start evidencing following the reform and what the reform that took, that is actually driving the savings that are sitting in that business case. Because otherwise you don't have the hardcore evidence to point to the success. And there is an element where the flip of the argument is the smaller the organisation, the quicker they can make decisions. And again, that's something we need the evidence for, to be able to start to show that, yes, this change is driving these efficiencies.
Yeah, and I should reiterate, in the course of this series, we'll be looking in a future session specifically at how efficiency savings can be secured. I mean, the other question I wonder if, before I come to Bella and Kay, on the questions about trust and voters and so on. I mean, do either of you have reflections on the benefits of consistency? I mean, we'll see where we end up, but certainly the government vision in the white paper was for something a lot more uniform, both at local government and strategic authority level across England. I mean, is that a good thing to aspire to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question, and I think that's something that is going to be key in how government evaluates and weighs things up. Because if you look at it from a business perspective, well, yes, from a business perspective, consistency would be a good thing, and that would be very, very good. If you look at it through a local community lens, you want to be associated with your community, you want to be associated with your local government, you want to be associated with place, and there's massive variation within local communities. And that, I think, comes back to the point of trust. So you need the trust. So actually, therefore, it would make more argument to go down the local community route, but then you're disadvantaging potentially your businesses and where you do need uniformity. And I don't necessarily know yet, and it's not been particularly clear, how do you evaluate what is two competing factors to reach the best decision?
No,
really interesting. Do you have a quick thought on that
very
point?
Quickly come in and say that I think that, yes, I mean, if you look at the two-tier system in the context of the UK local authorities, it is still a minority of the population that is actually represented by two-tier authorities. So there is a case for some element of consistency which helps more broadly the sector. I think that one of the points I would say as well is that when we've engaged with local leaders in this space who have led through local government reorganisation, they said that they entered it one in particular, chief executive, said to me that they entered it very much as a skeptic, saying, but we deliver our services the most efficient we possibly could. But then actually all of a sudden being within the same organisation without the boundaries between district and upper tier then meant that they could actually join up their services. So it meant it was much easier for service delivery for individuals. So I think that there are also policy benefits as well, in addition to the sort of consistency of the public. And just a very final point linking to discussion earlier that I meant to say, but I didn't, which is actually drawing attention to what you were saying earlier, Kay, about how you deliver your services. The point I was saying earlier about the fact that services aren't all the same. They don't all necessarily operate on exactly the right same footprint. It will be down to the new unitary authorities to work out actually what is best for the service delivery, what are the outcomes that we are trying to drive, and actually do we need to come up with, say, smaller scale service delivery for some of these services to make sure that they are operating on the most efficient basis, because otherwise you're baking in inefficiency.
Yeah, thank you. Kay, if you want to respond to any of that, but also, interested in that question about, is this process going to be good for trust in local democracy?
Well, I mean, we know in local government, it doesn't matter how big or small you are, decisions just don't happen overnight, do they? Because of the governance arrangements we have and the process we have to go through. So people get frustrated, and I understand that. The other issue we have, and maybe one reason why voters are discontented with local councils, is because we are increasingly becoming councils that just deliver social care and housing. We don't have the money to deliver all the other things that people feel that their council tax should be spent on, and that's just the way the system works at the moment. I agree, communities need a local voice, and that's why we've been told to produce a framework. Now, how successful that will be is another matter, because I don't think it's necessarily always been successful in other areas. But if you go down to your very local level, at parish level, there are parish councils and there are parish councils. Some are very active, they rely on volunteers, some do the bare minimum. How do you engage local people to actually get into their community and volunteer and do those things when you're not actually paying them? I think perhaps we could get over some of the discontent if we were a bit more visible. So we have a huge network of libraries across Norfolk. We have 47 and we've kept them all open. I would like our libraries to be a one-stop shop for everything. So you can go in and you can see a person and you can actually get something done across the whole spectrum of what local government delivers. And there will be some efficiencies by doing that. So, for example, in housing and social care, those things should be brought together. And at the moment, they're separated into district and county functions. We could also, you said senior leadership team, there are efficiencies to be made there, IT, HR, bringing together specialisms so that you can then share them around. There are lots of things that we can do. Planning officers, you can't get planning officers, they're like hen's teeth. So to be able to share those would be a good thing. In terms of business, with a larger unitary, you do have the ability to invest, I believe. I mean, as a county council, as a big council, we invest a lot in our local businesses and they really appreciate that. And they are very concerned that by breaking the county up into smaller unitaries, there won't be the opportunity for them to actually have that funding. But you will get differences of opinions from whether you're talking to the county council network or the district council network as to what size of a unitary is the perfect and fits everything. I think whatever happens, it's got to be tailored to the area. I'm really concerned about getting richer areas and poorer areas and a postcode lottery if we're not very careful.
Yeah, thank you. And so Bella, if you want to respond to any of that, I think interested in your questions also about trust in local democracy. There's also a question from the online audience I was going to put to you anyway, so I'll read it out, which is, how can local authorities, communicate a clear message to residents in areas that are undergoing two contradictory processes simultaneously, i.e. LGR abolishing a layer of local government, devolution introducing a new one? I mean, you've basically said that you agree with both the LGR and the devolution aspirations. How are you communicating that to voters, given potentially the sense that it's contradictory?
Thanks. An excellent set of questions. I'll start by just this issue of trust and sort of trust in politics, trust in politicians, trust in central government, trust in local councils. I think in answering that question honestly, we have to reflect the fact that under the last parliament, we saw a drop in living standards in this country for the first time in living memory. Austerity policies that were implemented between sort of 2010, 2019 saw real terms cuts in funding of the public sector, including local government. So to answer the question, why do people feel that their councils are kind of delivering less or their places are looking worse? The reality is it's because they have been consistently underfunded. Now, we're obviously trying to turn that situation around now with real terms increases in public sector funding, but it takes time. And what we're seeing in local government is an increase in the complexity of need being presented, whether that is in housing and homelessness, in children's services, in adult services, because councils have been taken away from the preventative space that we were able to occupy when we were being funded properly in those sort of pre-austerity years. And it's really important to be honest about that, without being sort of overtly political. That is the factual reality. But what we've seen consistently, I think, is evidence suggesting that there is greater trust in local politicians than there often is in national politicians. Now, I believe, and based on my sort of experience as a local elected representative, that's because the vast majority of what people sort of come to elected representatives to get sorted really sits with local government. I remember Angela Rayner always saying, 70% of her mailbag as an MP is actually for her local council. We are the ones that are closest to communities, delivering hundreds and hundreds of services, and we're the ones that can often get things done, make things work better, get the outcome that a resident is looking for. And to my mind, the beauty of local government reorganisation, the beauty of the move to unitary government is it's going to free up local government to do that even more. I think Kay rightly makes the point. It's, to me, looking at the two-tier system currently, the fact you've got adult social care sitting in a different organisation to housing, really tells you the story of how dysfunctional the current system is. In my authority, when we took over in May 23, you had two separate directorates that were dealing on the one hand with adult social care and the other with housing. We decided that even within the same organisation, there were too many silos between those services by the fact they sat in different directorates. So we've now brought them under one directorate, which is really allowing us to get into the preventative space and to get better outcomes for our residents. So it's an absolute no-brainer, not just from the, is there the evidence that there are savings? To my mind, that there clearly is the evidence that there are savings from unitarisation. But I think we have to bear in mind that it's a dual process. So it's unitarisation and devolution. To come on to that kind of last question, those are not contradictory things. Unitarisation gives the certainty and uniformity that allows devolution, a system of regional government, to work effectively. If we're really looking for devolution in a meaningful sense, sort of ever greater devolution, if we're looking to be more like some of our European partners with greater fiscal devolution and real place leadership driving growth, then of course you need the system to be more uniform in order to give Treasury and central government the confidence that they can work with these new units of government in a way where they can, have some certainty for business as well, as others have mentioned, and have an idea if you put something into the system, what you're going to get out at the other end. So that's what I would say to that. I don't think these are contradictory things. I think they are absolutely mutually beneficial and complementary activities. That's why they were in one white paper together. And that is certainly the message that we're taking out to our communities. Yes, often this can seem quite technical and quite dry. It's going to be communities seeing the positive, tangible benefits that I think both of these processes can help deliver that will really ultimately make that case. But I believe strongly that will be people's experience over time.
That's great. Thanks, Bella. OK, so we've got about 5 minutes left. We've got lots of questions online. I'm going to chuck a few of them to the panel. You won't all be able to answer all of them, and so brief as possible. So this one, I think it's probably a good one for you, actually, Kay. But please could the leaders on the panel shed some light on the lobbying effort to government on this decision, and is it a fair fight? Do more time-rich leaders have an advantage in wining and dining ministers? Have you been wining and dining Steve Reed? Perhaps not. We'll hold your thought on that.
Second, I am available.
We'll pass that on, OK. So second question. If 500, this is from someone in a district council, it says, if 500,000 plus is the preferred size for unitary authorities, is the government going to be consistent and remove all unitary councils and London boroughs with smaller populations? I think we know the answer is no, but if not, why not is the follow-up. So if we've got views on that. And then what steps is the government taking or maybe what steps should it take to ensure democracy is not lost through this process? Meaning, are there going to be enough well-resourced councillors to support larger communities? I think that's quite interesting. And then the final one I'll throw in is about town and parish councils. Do the panel think it's essential to establish town and parish councils where they don't exist now, and why? So, take your pick. Do you want to go first?
I'll go first if you like. I haven't met Steve Reed. I have made that quite clear, but I am more than happy to have a conversation with him. Lobbying ministers, I don't know. I mean, all I would say to government ministers when they're making this decision is please check our homework, because we've all put these bids in, and I have to say that some of the figures I've seen may be a little unrealistic. So if you're going to rely on that bid, you need to make sure that it is actually what it says it is, and it's not just an aspiration. I mean, I've been a councillor since 1993, and councils have always been traditionally underfunded, I have to say. We've always felt like that. But the problem we have now is the perfect storm of underfunding with more statutory responsibilities and an increasing demand that we just can't keep pace with. That's why councils are in the position they are in now. Perhaps that's one of the drivers for LGR. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that's all I have to say on that.
Great. Okay, thank you. Matthew?
Fine, I'll take up the 500,000. Well, if government's to be consistent, then you could argue that there are efficiencies to be made, say, in Lambeth and Southwark, Steve Reed's former council, and say, well, you could save on the number of chief executives across the borough, for instance. It's not impossible that in years to come that there could be that kind of decision that's taken, but right now there's no political appetite for that, so I don't see that happening at all.
Okay, Joe, I'll come back to you last, but just giving Bella final words on any of those. I mean, I think there's that question about town and parish councils. I don't know if you've got views on that, or the overall number of councillors, whether that's going to in areas going through LGR going to be reduced. Does that matter for democracy, I suppose?
Yeah, another great set of questions. My first response would be, are there any time-rich council leaders? I'm yet to meet one. So I'm not sure there is sort of gratuitous lobbying going on. The council leaders I spend my time with are just, keeping their heads above water with the amount that is going on. But no, to the point on town and parish councils, I'm a very strong believer, representing the place that I represent, that you've got to allow at that local level a certain amount of kind of self-determination in terms of governance. So Brighton and Hove, the city that I lead, has one parish council. It's a village called Rottingdean that's just on the sort of city limits. Traditional village, fantastic, beautiful place, and they have a parish council that functions brilliantly well, and we've got a really good relationship. The rest of the city doesn't have town and parish councils per se, but boy, does that not mean that they're not organised and let their voices be heard. I sometimes joke that I wake up some days in this city and I feel like I know what everybody is thinking and feeling. That is the amount of engagement we have from our residents, which is a brilliant thing, and people organise themselves in different ways, community groups, residents associations, like each place will have its way of doing it, and I think it's our job as local authority leaders to kind of embrace that and make sure that we are being accountable, that we are listening, that we are engaging in however our residents want to organise themselves and engage. So I think there should be flexibility retained for that. This is a process that still has to run its course. I think there are efficiencies to be made. From it, but it's also really essential that everybody involved in this process, approaches it in good faith. This is going to mean working across partnerships, across boundaries, working with politicians of different political flavours. But there is a real prize here for our residents, and I think it's incumbent on all of us, albeit that there are, people's own interests, their own kind of futures at stake, to try and, put that to one side and work in the interests of our residents to deliver a better system that will give us better results in the long run.
Great, thanks so much, Bella. And final word to you, Joe.
Yeah, I think it's really important that democracy is built into the governance and decision-making process in these new unitaries. And actually, it's a very valid point. Councillors need support. They need the right access to the right people, the right resources, the right skills. And I think that's something government does need to look at, and how that is supported in terms of supporting the councillors to ensure the democracy.
Terrific. Okay, thank you. Well, we are at the end of our 1 hour. I hope you've all enjoyed the conversation as much as I have, learnt a lot as well. So, yeah, thanks all for coming. Thank you again to Grant Thornton for their support. Do keep an eye on our website for information about the rest of the series. And please just join me in thanking our 4 panellists.